Okay, welcome back to another music vid. I've got 3 records and 3 CDs altogether. All of them albums, and I specifically say that because just recently I've been just contemplating buying CD singles, but it could lead to a slippery road, and I'm not sure I want to go down that road that I used to go down back predominantly in the mid-90s. But if I do, I'll start off just by buying a few classic ones, for me anyway. Things like Oasis and Blur and Suede. Things that I had in the mid-90s where I used to really enjoy B-sides especially. But it could open the door, and I'm not sure I want to do that. So for now, it's just going to be albums or EPs. I don't have too many EPs, but you know, I'm open-minded enough to get a few here and there. Obviously, if I really want it, I will. So no CD singles, either on vinyl or likely CD that I'll buy them back for. In the future, but that's in the future. We'll wait and see. So the first record and the first vinyl, the first album out of 6, is a band that have been around since, I mean, I'm going to hazard a guess they formed in the late 80s. I believe their first album came out in 92. It was pretty good at the time. I did like it. Let me just show you what it is, actually. The band is called The Prodigy, or are called The Prodigy. Now, this album, The Day Is My Enemy, came out in 2015, so it's relatively new, a couple of years old. And I've got to be honest, I've had it for quite a while, but I didn't feature it on a pickups vid, on a music vid, because when I first listened to it, I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it, but I wasn't a massive fan, so I went away from it and I kind of left it on the shelf back there. And every now and again I've gone back to it, but it never really resonated with me. I don't know, there's something about it, I couldn't get into it. And so, you know, sometimes first impressions count, and my first impressions were that it just wasn't very good. Now, it didn't help that I spoke to a few people who had also listened to it, and they didn't like it at all. So I think sometimes that kind of, you know, shrouds your judgment as well. You know, if you didn't really get off to a good setting with it, and then other people are saying that they didn't like it, well, it makes your decision quite easy, and then you say you don't like it as well. So I think I was maybe a little bit influenced by other people there, because what I found, bizarrely, by going back to it, is that it's actually a decent record. I really quite like it. It's not amazing, but I like it much more than I did initially. If I was to review it out of 10, going back, 2 years, I probably would have given it, maybe 4 or 5. Whereas now, it's definitely gone up to maybe 6 or possibly 7. So it's still not great, but it just goes to show that if you spend a bit of time away from something and come back to it with a clean slate and a fresh approach, you can really enjoy it. Sorry, I've just got a really annoying pop-up of YouTube. Telling me that someone's uploaded a vid. Don't worry, it won't be you. It's one of those big kind of football channels. And it just stays there in the corner until you click it. It just go away. If it's going to be a pop-up, that's fine. Disappear after a few seconds. But anyway, I'm going off on one. So if that happens again and I lean over and I'm clicking on stuff, that's what I'm doing. So yeah, some really good tracks. The Day Is My Enemy, obviously, is the self-title track off the album. Nasty's a good song. Rebel Radio. Ibiza, which features the Sleaford Mods. And the Sleaford Mods are someone who I quite like. I'm not massively into them, but they're okay. Wild Frontier I really, really like. And yes, it's got some really good songs on there. So, yeah, as I say, if you are listening to an album or you've bought an album and you don't really get on with it, then before just, confining it to the dustbin or selling it or dismissing it, I just urge you to maybe put it to one side and go back to it in the future, whether that's a few weeks, months, or in this case, years later, 2 years later, and you may like it. So I really like it. As I say, it's not amazing, but give or take another couple of years, I may go back to it again, and it may be amazing, but I doubt it. It's just a good album. But yeah, The Prodigy. So that's their 6th album. Like I said, it's really surprising because they've been around for a long, long time, but that's by the by. Now, speaking of numbers, how many albums they've done, I know this one, because I had a sneaky look before I made the vid. And this is their 13th album, so they've been around a while. Again, a little bit like The Prodigy, since the late 80s. Probably 89 may have been their first album, actually. And that band, they're called the Charlatans. So the new album that's came out, and it's called Different Days. Now, this is really good. This is one in stark contrast to The Prodigy, where I put it... Oh, by the way, this just came out just a couple of months ago. In stark contrast to The Prodigy, where it took me ages to even remotely get into it, this one I got into straight away. And I think that's a sign of a really good album. When you put something on and instantly the tracks, you click with them. They instantly strike you as being really, really good. So it starts off with Hey Sunrise, which is a really good track. Things like Future Tense, let me see, The Setting Sun, Different Days, Plastic Machinery. Different Days and Plastic Machinery also feature, maybe Not Forgotten, maybe that's another one as well, which have Johnny Marr on guitar. And I knew Johnny Marr was on this record, but I didn't even have to look. I could tell instantly when I first heard Different Days. I was like, that's definitely a Johnny Marr track. And I looked it up. Wikipedia never lies. And yeah, Different Days is one that features Johnny Marr, but it was obvious by his guitar playing. You could instantly tell. So yeah, that's a really good track. It's also got Stephen Morris, who is the drummer from New Order. He features on a few tracks. So he's reined in some big hitters here. So I really, really like it. It's arguably, very arguably, one of my, if not even my favourite Charlatans album, which is incredibly high praise for an album which has just come out. But maybe because I've been listening to a lot, it's all still fresh in the mind, and I can, think of all the songs, and I can hear them all in my mind. So, yeah, maybe I'm being a little bit too rose-tinted glass. Or not even rose-tinted glass, I guess. It's more nostalgia-based, isn't it? Maybe I'm just being a little bit blinkered by the fact I've listened to it so much. And, yeah, maybe if I was to sit back and think about it, it wouldn't be my favourite. But it's certainly up there already. And in years to come, I may look back at it as my favourite. But without question, a really good album. I mean, I've got to laugh at Tim Burgess's his haircut. It's something else, man. He's brave to have that on his head. But he's a really good, talented artist. I really like him. And the Charlatans are a really good band. And obviously, it made me laugh, actually, because I was going to say, obviously, they're a big band, and pretty much everyone knows the Charlatans. But their first 2 or 3 albums, certainly the first couple, I think, went to #1 in the charts. And I was really surprised. I mean, I've known this for a few years, but I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, I just presumed, like, being sort of an indie kind of rock band at the time, back in the late 80s especially, I wouldn't have thought that would have gone to #1, but it did. So yeah, the Charlatans, Different Days, a really good return to form. Their last couple of albums were okay, but they didn't really strike me as instantly as this one. So yeah, Different Days, just come out. Check it out. Oh, and I should say as well, and this is going to tie into the next one, so a bit of a spoiler. The last track is really good. It's called Spinning Out. I show you there as if you're going to really see anything, which obviously you can't. But yeah, Spinning Out was a really good kind of deep groove, soul-based song, and it was written in conjunction with Paul Weller. You can really tell he does backing vocals as well. Excellent track. Possibly my favourite off the album. I think Plastic Machinery is really going to be the one which most people have probably heard, because I'm guessing that was a single. I don't know. Different Days has probably kind of got single written all over it. So I don't think Spinning Out is going to come out as a single, or if it does, it'll be maybe one that latterly, right at the end, when they kind of really milked it. But it's still a really good track. And like I say, it features Paul Weller. And here he is, Paul Weller, A Kind Revolution. Now, also, remember I said the Charlatans, that's their 13th album. Coincidentally, this is Paul Weller's 13th album. But also, little fact for you, it's his 25th album if you take into account the Style Council and the Jam. But as a solo artist, yeah, this is also his 13th album. And this is another one. I don't know if I'm just in a really good musical mood or what's going on, but I instantly put it on, and I thought, this is amazing. This is one of the first times for many years that I've sat down with a Paul Weller album, put it on, and it's instantly grabbed me. So it starts off with Woosie Mama, which is a really good song, and it's got real obvious hints, an obvious tribute, if you like, to his Style Council work back in the early to mid-80s. So if you like that kind of thing, you'll definitely see a connection with that. So that's a really good song. The next track is called Nova. Now, when I instantly heard it, and I mean instantly, straight away, I was like, that sounds like David Bowie. It basically is either I certainly wouldn't say a rip-off, but a definite tribute to David Bowie. So, because I thought that, and it was my immediate reaction, I went on to Google, and I, put a few keywords in, like, obviously Paul Weller, Nova, David Bowie, because I wanted to see if anyone else thought the same. And yeah, quite a few people had pointed that out as well. So I'm glad it just wasn't me. So, but it just goes to show that it's quite obvious, really. But that's a good song. Let me see what else. New York's a really good song. Now, this is an interesting one. Satellite Kid. This is quite random. There's a band, I've name-dropped them a few times in the past. They split up 22 years ago, I think. Just an indie band. They were never massive. Had a few minor hits. They were on Top of the Pops once or twice. But more like a cult studenty indie band from the early 90s, and they were called Kingmaker. A really talented songwriter, Loz Hardy, really supremely talented, and I really like them. And it's very much kind of nostalgia driven, but I do like them as a band as well. And on their third album, which is called Sleepwalking, if you can count their second album, which is called To Hell with Humdrum, which was kind of a mini EP, but let's just count it as an album for the sake of it. So their third album was called Sleepwalking, and one of the tracks off Sleepwalking is called Sequin Thug, and the intro is the bass guitar basically, and a really deep groove to it, and it's so similar, and that is an understatement, to Satellite Kid, that it made me think that Paul Weller, maybe not him directly, had ripped off Kingmaker and could think that he could get away with it because not many people have heard of Kingmaker. Now, I don't think Paul Weller ripped him off, but this is my little theory on this, okay? This is my little theory, because it's so familiar and similar. I urge you to check it out. All right, go onto YouTube, go onto Spotify, listen to Satellite Kid, just the first kind of 20, 30 seconds, and then listen to Kingmaker, Sequin Thug from 1993, and you'll see what I mean. It's the same song. It's the same bass guitar. Now, this is my little theory, though, because I was watching an interview quite recently, just the other day, from Paul Weller, where he was talking about this new album, and which, did I say this also just came out, I think, 6 weeks ago or something. And Paul, like I know him, Paul was saying that, what he wanted to do for this album was to rein people in of all ages, and some who were significantly younger than him, and a few who were older, but definitely younger than him, because he didn't just want to rely on bringing in the same old tried and trusted people. He wanted that fresh creativity that younger people can put in, new influences and all that kind of stuff. So my theory here is that one of the younger people that he brought in maybe is around about my age, give or take, who remembers the early 90s indie scene and maybe listened to Kingmaker, and they probably thought, I tell you what, well, I used to listen to Kingmaker, not many people have heard of them, so I'm going to put that bass guitar groove, if you like, into this song. I'm going to present it to Paul Weller, pretend it's my own. I'm looking too deeply into this, aren't I? And then Paul's probably obviously never heard of Kingmaker or Sequin Thug, so he's thought, that sounds really good. I think that's what's happened, I really do, because it's so uncanny. It's incredible. But anyway, jovialities aside, which could well be true, but I doubt it, it's still a good song. Satellite Kid is a really good song. And The Impossible Idea is a really nice song as well, a really good one to end on. So a very, very strong song, strong album. Now, I will say as well, there's one more track, and it's called One Tear. It's on side 2. It's the third track from the end. And it's a strange track in the sense that it's almost a disco-y club dance track, almost. Well, in fact, it is, actually, quite frankly. And it's amazing. I really like it. It's one of my favourite tracks off the album. But the best thing I like about this one is that it was written with Boy George. Obviously, everyone knows of Boy George's Culture Club. And if you don't know what Boy George has done outside of his kind of solo work and Culture Club, he's a DJ. He's very much into that kind of club and dance scene, if you like. And that is so obvious. That track, like I said, called One Tear. And when you listen to it, it seems a little out of place in the sense that it's so disco and dance and club driven, which is definitely not really what you associate with Paul Weller, of course, but it works. And it's really nice to see him trying something new. I mean, obviously, Boy George is around about the same age as Paul Weller, maybe slightly younger, just by a few years. But yeah, it's interesting that, like I say, he was trying different things out with younger people and older people from different genres and interests and scenes, and it's a really good idea. It's resulted in a strong album. So, A Kind Revolution, Paul Weller, a fantastic album. Did I show the back? Not that it matters, but just aesthetically if you want to see it. A brilliant album. Possibly, arguably, my favourite Weller album for a long, long time. I'm not going to say ever and make the stupid mistake in hindsight, which I think I just did with the Charlatans one. The Charlatans one, Different Days, isn't my favourite ever. I'll take that back. That was maybe a little bit silly. It could well be in the future, with the benefit of hindsight, and that's what time does, doesn't it? But yeah, A Different Days is a really good album. One of my favourite Charlatans albums for a year, for several years. And the same can be said with Paul Weller, A Kind Revolution, a really good album. And you've got to check it out. You really have to. It's very, very good. Now, 3 CDs to finish with. The first one is a kind of a folk band, if you like, very loosely rock. Definitely elements of reggae, a supremely talented outfit. The singer, I think, has got a great voice. I've watched and listened to several interviews, and they come across as really friendly and genuine, just nice, down-to-earth people. Now, for whatever reason, they're quite big in Holland. I did touch upon this band going back a few vids because I had one of their vinyls. This is their debut album, self-titled debut album. But to my knowledge, they're not particularly big, not huge. And it's a real crying shame because, you know, I know it's all subjective, of course, but you know when you see people, you know, the Justin Biebers, and I'm not having a go at people like that. I don't know that many Justin Bieber songs, I've got to be honest. In fact, I'm not even lying. I couldn't name one off the top of my head. But I'm sure if I was to sit down and listen to them, I'd probably find one or two that I like. You know, I'm not that stuck up where I wouldn't acknowledge a good song here and there. But it's not really my thing, and that's an understatement. But you see all this manufactured stuff. I won't say rubbish, you might like it, and, you know, and I might in the future, who knows. But you see all these manufactured, heavily promoted bands and artists, and really, they're all right at best for the most part. And then you get artists like this, who 100% write their own stuff, and they're very talented, creative, and they're never really going to get anywhere. Not really. Now, don't feel too sorry for them. I'm sure they're quite wealthy. You know, they make music and they tour and they gig and they've got record deals and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure they've got a great life. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they are releasing music. So does it really matter? Does it really, as a fan anyway, does it really matter if a band is releasing music and they never really sell too many records in the scheme of things? If you get to listen to it and you can enjoy it and you can spread the word and let other people enjoy it and appreciate it, does it matter? I've rambled on too much there. That band are called Wilner People, and this is their debut album, self-titled debut album. And it's funny because even though it's a CD, as you can clearly see here, it's in one of these kind of fold-out, almost gatefold, kind of really thin card packaging style things, as opposed to a case. And so, yeah, some really good songs on here. I talked about Wilner People maybe a little bit more in depth. When was it? Maybe 2 or 3 vinyl vids back. You may have seen it. If not, obviously you can always go back and watch it if you want. But yeah, some really good songs on here, such as Lion in the Morning Sun. Not Lying, Lion in the Morning Sun. Salamander is probably the most radio-friendly one. But then there's a song called The Game, which is so good. And it may or may not be the song which I put in the description box below. So please check it out, along with a track from every other album. I'll mention this again at the end if I remember. But yeah, now The Game is a song which is really, really good. But it really hooks you probably maybe 2 or 3 minutes in. That's when it really kind of changes the progression. And it's like, wow, this is a really strong song. So yeah, Wilner People, I'm really fond of this band. They're really, really, really good. Obviously not my favourite ever or anything like that. But one of those bands, if I ever get into a discussion with somebody about underrated acts and people who really should get more attention, then this is definitely one of them. Will and the People. Check them out. They're really, really good. I think they're from London, I think. And like I said, for whatever reason, people in Holland have really gravitated towards them. Now, I don't know if that's because they do a lot of gigs there or festivals. I don't know what it is, but they seem to be quite popular there. It's kind of weird, really. Now, the next album is by a band with the most ridiculous band name of all time, quite frankly. But it's an album which is really, really good. It's technically their first album. They did release something before, or maybe they didn't, maybe their record label did. There's some kind of controversy about it, but it wasn't an album. It was like maybe an EP or some kind of collection of songs. I'm not entirely certain. But this is their debut album, and the debut album is called Godfodder, and the band, get ready for this, are called Neds Atomic Dustbin. Neds Atomic Dustbin, what a name. So, yeah, Godfodder, their debut album. Now, I remember going back, I've mentioned this program many, many times, in the early to mid-90s, especially early 90s, there was a music program, hosted by Gary Crowley called The Beat, and it focused predominantly, but not exclusively, but predominantly on the indie music rock scene, which ultimately kind of morphed into like Britpop and all the rest of it. But it had dance, it had kind of club stuff on there, but it was predominantly student kind of indie bands. So things like, I mentioned Kingmaker before, Neds Atomic Dustbin, bands like Suede when they were very much starting out, The Verve when they were starting out, Ya Wobble of the Heart, if anyone remembers those, Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, name dropped those many times, The Wonder Stuff, Teenage Fan Club, that kind of stuff. And Neds Atomic Dustbin, I remember it would have been back in probably 91, 92, they were on there, and they had a song which is the opening track to Godfather called Kill Your Television. And it was a really, really, instantly, me and my mate, when we listened to it, we used to stay up actually we didn't stay up and watch it because it was on in the middle of the night, but we'd record it and then watch it like the day or a few days later. And it would introduce us to a load of good indie bands, which we were into at the time in our very early teens, like literally 13. So yeah, Kill Your Television, a really good song. I instantly loved it back in the day. It's a great track. Less Than Useful is also an amazing, amazing track, arguably better than Kill Your Television. And then things like Until You Find Out is a good track. Happy, yeah, just a really good kind of indie album. So if you're into that kind of scene, check out Ned's Atomic Dustbin. A nice blue little spine there for those who care. So yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, they are still going. I don't think they technically split up. I think what happened is they had several kind of lineups. But I stand corrected on this. But I don't think they've released an album, despite reforming many years ago with their original lineup. I don't think they've released any new music for about 15 years or something crazy like that. They've only had maybe 3 or 4 albums. It's something like that. So they're touring, they're gigging. I know a lot of bands are doing that these days, aren't they? They're getting back together and they're touring, just doing the odd gig here and there, and not releasing stuff. And maybe that's a good thing. I'd like to see them release more music, fresh music. But does a band have to get back together and release new stuff? Or can they just get back together and tour and gig and you can watch it? Either or, to be honest. And then last but not least is an album by a really good band. This is their second album. I do prefer their debut album, which is called All Change. This is their follow-up. It's called Mother Nature Calls. The band is Cast. And yeah, I really like it. All Change, without question, is my favourite Cast album. Another band who have relatively recently reformed, the last few years. I think they had a new album which came out this year. Again, this is another one I may have talked about because I picked up All Change on vinyl. So that would have been on a recent pickup vid. And the CD I've got, which would have been on a CD vinyl pickup vid going back a couple of years at least. So yeah, some good songs in here like Free Me, Live the Dream, I'm So Lonely, Guiding Star. But what I will say about this album, and I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again, but obviously Cast very much kind of in that Britpop mould. But even by 1997, that whole Britpop scene had started to change. So it's really only Guiding Star, which is one that immediately sticks out, which, resembles Britpop as we knew it just a year or two before that. This is really 97 onwards is when things started to change. You still had Britpop bands like Cast and Oasis and Blur and Suede and you name it. They were still around, but their style had changed. And then you had other bands like Embrace and Gomez and The Verve, Urban Hymns. Obviously, The Verve had been around a while. I touched upon them before, being around in the early 90s. But really, it was around about that time, Urban Hymns, 97, where that Britpop music was still there, but it was Britpop kind of Mark II. It started to change to morph into this, really. And I do like it. It does work. But yeah, I definitely prefer All Change. For me, that is definitely the better album. But it's still a really good record. But it just goes to show you, doesn't it, that it's all connected. All this kind of stuff. Britpop Mark II, if you like. It all goes back. I was having this discussion the other day. Someone was saying that they don't like certain styles of music. And that's fine. We've all obviously got our things that we love and things that we're not too keen on. But music is just connected. You look at like punk and then there's rock and glam before that. And then there's new wave and then pop came out and new wave. And, and then that morphs kind of into like the indie scene. And then that morphed into like Britpop, which is a Britpop Mark II, if you like. Dance was as a result of all that. It's all connected. Music is connected. And it doesn't mean to say you've got to gravitate towards it and accept it all and buy it all. We all like different things. But it always surprises me when people say they don't like music. So how can you not like music? Or if they especially the other day, this one particular person wasn't keen on like kind of indie music and rock music, but they liked punk music. And it's the same thing, really. I know it's different. I'm not that stupid, but it's connected. It's all connected. But anyway, that was a pointless little rant at the end there. So I'll be back. Obviously, it's August already. Happy August. I will be back before the month is out with another vinyl and CD pickup vid. And I'm really going to get back into the routine of making them. I know I always say it, and I do apologise, but we know what it's like with working. and just been busy doing other things, responsibilities, etc., etc. But yeah, now, as I say, check out the description box below. You will see some songs, or one song from every album, and hopefully you'll like it. If you do, you may want to go off and buy some stuff, or download it, or watch them, or live, or whatever it may be, or just, you know, psychologically it'll be stored there in your brain in the future. So check them out. They're not necessarily my favourite tracks off the albums. They're just a song which maybe I'm listening to at the moment, or which I think is pretty good. And yeah, that's that. Thanks for watching. There's the records. Can't really see too much there. Oh yeah, there you go. Bit of variation in the spine. And then of course the 3 CDs. So thank you for watching. Until my next music vid, because my next video full stop will be tomorrow, but or maybe even later today. But my next music vid will be later on this month. Thanks for watching. See you later.